judges a little bit. That seems a little interesting to me and stuff. I'm not saying that's the case, but there's something in the education world that's self-guided curriculum. But, so, anyway, as we get going, happy Mother's Day, and hopefully how we doing? I don't know about you guys, but Mother's Day snuck up on me this year. It just seemed like I got a text from my sister on Tuesday, hey, what are you getting Mom for Mother's Day? I'm like, it's like another week away, isn't it? Or something? No, it's this Sunday. So.
Yeah, Easter was late and everything.
Yeah.
Just kind
It
of.
was Easter, then it was a decoration last week, and so I was like, whoa, it is Mother's Day, so. But anyway, like I said, happy Mother's Day, and I hope it's a good one. As I said, I can say, I don't know where I'd be without my mother. I guess I'd have raisins, no raisin bran back when I was young, right? Yeah, no, that did. Somehow it's got,
The biggest raisins out of his raisin bran, y'all.
that's her story.
No, she told me that.
She's insane.
She told me that right before we got married.
She's pretty, 85 years old, she's in pretty good health. I think I'm just gonna I'm gonna test her memory on that. I don't remember that.
She
Is that never-
told me that right before we got married.
She did it on her own. Yeah. Like I said, mother's also good like that for spilling secrets to your spouses. I guess. So, anyway, guess the way of getting back. Like I said, looking at 2 Kings chapter 4, just kind of, as I said, just going through trying to find something related. And this is a story I hadn't been familiar with, but it's I think it gives us a lot of different things to look at, and as we go from there, just kind of just open it up right here. You know, is there a time where someone's hospitality deeply impacted you, or something where someone showed you hospitality and it just stands out? It's just something that isn't maybe family, but just anybody, anything there where it's just like, wow.
I noticed it, and maybe people notice it about us too, but especially going to different churches, how their hospitality differs one to another, you know. And I get it, the bigger churches can't be as hospitable as we can because we're fewer people, you know. But yeah, that stands out a lot. And then I've had friends growing up, and growing up during the 80s as a kid, you didn't have cell phones much, so you had to go to kids' house if you wanted to play, and you met their parents.
Yeah.
And so that was a whole lot different. You got to meet a lot of different kids' parents, and a lot of them treated you different, you know. You remember that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, there was always we had, basically it's kind of similar, it's a little different, but similar like Frida is here. You know, we basically, where I grew up, Mom's Land's on the end of a dead end of a county road, and it's basically the Pierce compound, basically what it was. It was my mom and all her sisters right there, and her mom, before she had a stroke, we had to take care of, but it was on top of a hill and all the land. I don't know how many acres, but the cousins right there. You know, we had our interstate system of trails through the woods going to each other's houses, and we had a good time. And it was always, we knew, we always liked going to my Aunt June's house, and Aunt June passed away back in August, but she was always one. If you went there, she's gonna have some type of sweet for you or something, or food, or and all of them were the same way. It was just different ones and stuff like that.
I thought something, I used to like to go to my great aunt and great uncle in Childersburg. They were very hospitable toward me as a kid, and I just remember that. Like she'd make my favorite meal, and like you said, desserts, and they would take me places, and always have the bed made up real nice, and like I was at a hotel or something. And I was just a little kid, and I thought that was so cool. So.
Anybody else? Maybe something where it's not family, or maybe just more even closer to the complete strangers. That's tough today. I mean, just I guess I'll just say this from a coaching point of view. Like when we go, there were certain places. Try to do this, especially in high school. College is a little different because you got people that are hired to do that. But in high school, there were certain places where pretty much when you pulled up, you were on your own. You got to figure out where to go. And I always remembered the schools that did it, try to do it professionally. We tried to do that. We'd send out an email with a picture of Google Maps. Hey, pull your bus here, have it all drawn, make sure there's a coach to meet them and stuff like that. So places like that stood out for me just from that point of view. And it's probably, there's similar things there everywhere. So, but yeah, hospitality. And I think that's one thing especially. We're going to see hospitality here. We're going to see faith. We're going to see faith in Christ as we see there some of the headings. So what we're looking at here is 2 Kings and chapter 4, and we got Elijah the prophet. Now, Elijah who came before Elijah? Elijah. Now, when I see those names without I sit there and have to stop and think, because I'm like, those are the same people, or because you know how sometimes you get some different names and things like that. Just a little bit of the background. I didn't have it down here. I was reading it. But has anyone, if you've studied Elijah and Elijah, again, I have to sit here and look just to make sure I get it right. But Elijah, who, if you had to describe him, what was more of his role as a prophet? Who did he more deal with?
Kind of the kings and leaders.
Yeah, he was more of a, hey, I'm gonna tell truth to power guy, wouldn't he? That could be, like I said, you start telling powerful, people of those days, they start prophesying some of, how many times in the Bible we saw prophets having to tell the leaders, especially things they didn't want to hear. And then Elijah was more grassroots, not to put it in a simple term right here. So I kind of found that interesting. And there's, I think in chapter 2, it kind of gets more into the Elijah relationship right there. But let's take a look at verses 8 through 10 right here. And it fell on a day that Elijah passed the Shunem. And again, some of these names right here, I want to apologize in advance because I'm going to, with my good Walker County upbringing and accent, I'm probably going to butcher these. Where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that oft as he passed by, he turned to thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passes by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn in.
Thither.
How's that?
Thither.
Thither. I didn't know if that ate the salad or not.
Turn in.
Thither, anyway. Turn in. So we see here, Elijah's passing by, and we see a woman. And the first thing we see right here is, what's the first thing that kind of jumps out to me, especially in verse 8, she says she perceives him to be what?
Man of God.
Now, what do you think, just kind of getting into it there, that first, it says, kind of gets into why do you think she helped Elijah? Obviously, it's thought it was a man of God, but I'm going to get a little deeper right there. What you know that?
She had to be a woman of God and be in tune with God.
Yeah, you got to be in tune right there with what you're looking for. You know, it'd be like, you know, I like using extreme examples. I do this when I teach class because, you know, just over the top stuff. But if you're sitting at Atlanta Airport, and if anyone here ever been to Atlanta Airport? If you haven't, but if you have,
Unfortunately.
you know, it's the busiest airport in the world. So you can imagine what the concourse is like during the course of the day, or, you know, kind of, I don't know, if you're sitting there, maybe a little more locally, sitting there waiting at your favorite restaurant or something on a Friday evening, or Sunday after lunch on Mother's Day. So, or, you know, Saturday evening, Valentine's weekend, whatever. And people come and go, and that's a person of God, that's not, you know. So being in tune right there, I think, you know, so she was so it tells us right there a little bit about her, doesn't it? So we see there that, you know, that this reveals something about her spiritual insight. The fact that she was able to, you know, get the, what's the word, feeling, vibe, whatever you want to call it right here. And so we can see there that as she goes through, she helped her, like I said, she recognized Elijah as a man of God, and her actions reflected this understanding, and it was important. And not only that, we see, you know, it's important, her hospitality right there, you know, kind of shows, and it shows that her kindness was rooted in the spiritual, what's the word, knowledge, as we say, and the heart of her hospitality. So, you know, so we got that right there. You know, we see how can we make room, you know, and again, this might be something for, you know, what did she, you know, when she saw the man of God, or, you know, when she saw the man of God right there, what did she do? I mean, it says she wanted to do what?
Feed him.
She wanted to feed him, make a room. So in other words, she did what? Prioritize, or made a priority or an effort to make sure that she accommodated him. And that's kind of what, you know, kind of what the lesson gets into here a little bit. You know, how can we make room for God in our lives? We just got to prioritize it. In other words, she just took the time and says, hey, I'm going to go out of my way right here and help this guy and help him out right there. You know, it's just, it could be as making time, as, you know, offering resources, being proactive and supporting the work of the kingdom, acts of service, or even just praying. And just like I said, just creating space, you know, for God's word. So verses 11 through 17 right here, as we kind of move on, we're going to see that God's going to reward her for her faith. So we go on, and it says, and it fell on that day that he came, say that for me again, for you. Thither, thank you. And he turned into the chamber and lay there. And he said to Gehazi, is that how I pronounce that in my head? I don't know if y'all good with that. His servant called this Shunammite, and when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, say now unto her, behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldst thou be spoken for to the king, or to the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among my own people. And he said, what then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, verily she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, call her. And we had called her. She stood in the door. And he said, about this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thy handmaid. And the woman conceived and bare a son that season that Elijah had said unto her, according to the time of life. So now we see the next step where Elijah is going to kind of reward her here for her faith. So as we look at it in the first question there, did she ask for a reward?
No.
So again, what does that tell us right there about her mindset right there? You know, And there's times, I think that's, you know, I had to catch myself. Man, hey, you know, if I see this hungry person right here, maybe if I give him something to eat, I might get rewarded in advance. Is that the attitude I need to have when I'm trying to help? No. So, you know, I think that she doesn't have that attitude. She's purely what? She's helping these people based on,
Just doing what God wants her to
yeah,
do.
just doing what God wants her to do right there. So now, as I said, she didn't ask for a reward. She was promised a son, but also, you know, we see this, and you know, and how, like I said, what does this say about God's grace? You know. What does that say? I mean, she didn't seek a reward. But God does what? Yeah, he rewarded. Anyway, now, and again, she didn't, like I said, she didn't request it. And, you know, like I said, we don't know her mindset. Maybe she silently wanted that. But I think that, you know, as we said, sometimes, you know, have you ever, like I said, looked back and, you know, God's rewarded you for something that you hadn't really asked for, and you didn't even realize it happened at the time, till after the fact. You know, maybe, like I said, maybe you can think of stuff like that. You know, for a lot of times, for me, I think I've gotten rewarded for things I thought I wanted, but I didn't get. And wound up getting something better at times. When I thought I got a no, but it just turned out, you know, especially, you know, sometimes, especially, like I said, in the job roles, you know, stuff like that, you know, seeking things. So, you know, I want you to think about that. Look back. Maybe there's been some times where, hey man, I kind of got rewarded right there, and didn't even really, you know, realize it until after the fact, or you know, or it's going on, and you know, and it could be, you know, as I said, for teachers, you know, for fellow teachers, like I said, as I look over, I think there's 4 teachers, and we got, you know, and Ms. Tavis in education as well, but what's that?
I was just gonna say, everything she done here is, I would say, it's kind of prophecy, and it's, pointing exactly to what Jesus said too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's some of the question. It gets into some I have written down, but it talks about how does this point to Christ, you know, and it's kind of getting back to my point. How many times I know in the education world, but especially I'll be having a bad day, or some kid come up and say something to me right there, and it's just, you know, I've been judged, and it just, dang. Coach, I really appreciate it. Just something that simple, you know. We get, you know, you never know when there's just some, and it's always for me to be sat there, and you may be questioning, man, I'm going to get out, I'm getting out of education, and some kid comes, Coach, I appreciate you. And it's just like, man, just right when I have myself convinced of it, you know, they get you kind of refueled there. But, you know, and that's the thing, you know, where blessings that we get, you know, there's sometimes a lot of people look at them, you know, when people think blessings, what do they usually associate that with? The regular world usually associates that with what? Material stuff, where there are so many blessings, and that's what people, I think, that don't, you know, that don't know Jesus, they don't understand what you get from just sometimes what they would consider non-material blessing, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Jesus wants us to do anyway.
Yeah.
So he said, as much as you've done to the least of these, you know, and that's exactly what she did.
Yeah, like I said, no other reason other, hey, man, you know, because, you know, and I think that's things there that's kind of lessons for us here in the year 2025. I had to sit there and think what year it was for a second. That's just where I'm at, you know, and then we're talking, you know, Old Testament here. Look at her response in verse 16 right there. The last part right there, after he told her that thou shalt embrace the son, how was her response?
She thought he was lying.
Yeah. You know, You say something like that, again, education background is what I got, but here's, I'll say something, hey, like I promised the kids something in class, hey, we'll have a pizza party Friday, so I just use that. Coach, don't you be playing with me now. You know what I'm saying?
Don't be playing.
Don't be playing.
They don't want disappointment.
Yeah, they didn't want it, and I think that's what we're seeing here. And are there times where maybe, what do you think? Where do you think her response came from?
From what she can see in front of her face.
In front of her face, yeah, that, or looking behind.
Mm-hmm.
Good friend of mine. He's he's a mental. That's what he does. He's a mental performance coach, I guess, is what he does. Is anyone here familiar with John Gordon books? Want to know John Gordon? He's more especially in sports. He kind of a mental health or mental performance expert now, but it's more like, especially in the team, it's like I can't think. Richard killed him out. I can't recite those books, but anyways, they're used not only in athletics but in the corporate world about talking about getting people to work together and the mind, the mindset and things of that nature. I say all that and I forgot. But Richard would say, if you think about it, everybody is a product of their experiences when it gets down to it, for the most part. And that's one thing I didn't realize that, but that's the thing I always try to think of when I have that kid in the classroom that gets on your nerves, that bothers everybody. That you think, I can't, but if you think about it, probably they're a product of some of the things that have happened to them in the past, whether they may or may not can help it. And I always tried, to make sure before I really was leap to get it, that kid in my classroom, I used to get mad at the end of it because it's, how many days? I know you got to count it down.
No,
She's too busy on the phone, so she don't know. But how many days left?
8.5 till school.
Yeah, 8.5
for kids.
for the
I
kids.
worked with some of you. I only have 3 days left.
Yeah, it's good. So, and so as we get to that, lost my train of thought, I forgot on that. What was I saying? Anyway,
How about Richard?
yeah, talking about all that, but we're products of our experiences. So I said it's getting that. So you get to those days where it's the days of the finals, and the kids are exempt, and you're going to have those 3 to 5 kids that are always going to be there. And I used to think, and I used to, and I'd sit there and I'd be wondering, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And then I got thinking, and then it's like someone told me one time, well, for some of these kids, this is the only place they're going to get there that they're able to get food during the day. And that struck home with me. Or perhaps for a lot of kids, the 8 hours they're in that school building, maybe the 8 hours they're not subjected to all they're hearing is yelling, screaming, and cussing or being involved. So I think,
It's also the only time some of them have an adult be kind to them.
that's true too. And I think that, we can take that step as Christians, sometimes, we need to, maybe, sometimes we're the ones they're looking to for, and again, as I got later on in my career, it didn't bother me. It'd be like, okay, yeah, hey, just sit over there, and it's just one of those things where, especially in those days, that's kind of one of those days where, it was kind of okay. Kind of glad they had a cell phone because they get on their phone over there, stay out of my hair, and I was able to get my work done. But anyway, we are a product. So she was probably a product of experience. Perhaps her and her husband had tried to have children in the past, and there had been. I don't know. We don't know that. I don't know the backstory there. But we see that how many times when it comes to blessings, I'm not talking about her one, but just in general, blessings in general, that we kind of. Well, we're kind of a little bit timid. I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want to ask God. I might get disappointed if I ask for this or something. where, you know, at times, you know, if we do that, where, I don't want to ask you to be disappointed, what does that do?
Well, if we're asking for things, sometimes I feel like we will we'll ask for things that we can relate to more
Mm-hmm.
with our living here on earth and our finite minds, and we don't put into account and think about what God's able to do
Yeah.
when we ask for things, or we'll ask amiss that we use it on ourselves or something, or to try to get our own glory with it. But
So we put human limitations on God.
Yep.
When,
yeah, that's kind of what she did. That's what Sarah did.
oh
That's
yeah.
what
Some of the commentary kind of refer. This is kind of you know, we see, you know, Sarah and
yeah.
others where, you know, and again, they're not on top of my head. We see other stories about this about. But I think also, you know, for us, you know, have faith in God. It's like, hey, I'm going to ask for, man, I really would like that, you know, I mean, I did tell you this, you know, I got inquired about a college offensive line job last night. I was like, not interested. It happened to use RSL for sure. But, you know, it might be one of those, hey, man, I really want this job. Man, I want this job.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, I don't get it. And it could be because, and then what we got to trust is if God, you know, when God said, I guess, if He told me no in that situation, why do I have to trust God in knowing that what? Yeah, I'm going no here. There's something better for you down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to be. So, you know, and I think that's something I think we need to keep in mind. And, you know, I'm not talking about, big guy, now, when I walk around the corner, I like to find a bag full with $50,000. You know, that's not what I'm talking about. You know, I think everybody, we're all mature enough in here to understand when I say blessings. We know what we're talking about, right? Could be health, could be, you know, whatever. So as we go along right here, you know, we see that she's, you know, she says she's protecting her heart. You know, perhaps, you know, like I said, you know, when he mentions that, the promise of a child has touched a deep place of past disappointment. You know, and it may be fear of being let down, or the hope that she's not going to be given false promises. Because I think, you know, false promises can be bad too. You know, if you promise stuff, especially to what, and again, going back to my years as an educator, I try not to promise kids things I didn't think I could deliver. You know, so I always try to keep my word on. And I've also, in the period of as an assistant coach or whatever, sometimes, especially later on in my career, when I had a little more, you know, I'd say, hey, we promise these kids that we're going to do this, and if we don't, they will not trust us. You know, so I think that's, you know, false promises. You know, we're afraid of those. But, you know, just as we say right here again, it's human nature for us to be cautious when we've experienced disappointment. But I think when we ask God, don't be afraid to ask God for blessings. Don't be afraid that, you know, and if He does, the answer is no. Just have it in the back of our mind something else. But, you know, the human race is known for our patience, aren't we? Patient people. You know, I get mad now, you know, in the internet world. I can remember, hey, it took 15 seconds for that site to load. What's going fast? Now for the next 15 seconds, I said, what's wrong with the internet? What's wrong with the internet? Internet's off. Took 15 seconds to load. But, you know, or the microwave. And I tell you what, the longest period of a teacher's life is you're trying to run that test off right before that next period starts, and you got to go 30 copies, and that copier's going slow. But anyway. All right, so we keep on. Let's go to verses 18 through 30 right there again, so we can pick that right. Faith in Christ is right here. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day, and again, you got to realize that, you know, I don't know what grown